Hey everyone, welcome to your second session of Real Talk. We're glad that you are joining us again. We have a few housekeeping things to take care of, so if you haven't introduced yourself on the LinkedIn group, please do that, and then I'll stop obnoxiously asking you to do it. We're going to assign you with your mentor informational interview person from those introductions. We have Q&A working now, we hope. So we would love if you all would send in questions throughout the presentation. Know that we are pretty sure there's a 30-second delay on your end. So if we don't answer your questions right away, we think we'll probably just save those till the end of each section and then get to those. So we're not ignoring you, we promise, but please send in your questions as you think of them so that you don't forget. We are going to be reviewing your resumes. So after Linda does her fantastic session today, please incorporate all the wonderful things she says, and then you can send us your resumes to review. And we will be assigning you to one of us. So, hi. Or Linda.
Hey.
Okay. And we will put that in the LinkedIn group so that you know who you are assigned with. Please email that person. We'll give you our emails as well. Please email that person your resume by Monday, and we will review that for you and get it all ready to go. Anything else to add, anyone?
Sounds good.
All right, so Linda's going to go ahead and start us off.
Great, thanks. Hi, everybody. Hope you're having a good day wherever you might be. Seems like most of us are along the West Coast. We're going to talk about resumes and cover letters. As you can imagine, there is a lot that goes into resumes and cover letters, and you probably are always looking online trying to find out what in the world am I supposed to focus on. At least that's what I hear from a lot of people. They'll Google best resumes, they'll Google best cover letters, and what I find is when I come and see them, you know, they're overwhelmed or too many things to consider. And so hopefully today I'm going to help you understand what's most important. Know that there's lots of gray area. There's not a black and white. There's not a lot of rules. But hopefully we'll give you some good guidelines today so you feel a little bit more productive and focused on where you want to go. And I have received a lot of good feedback from folks. Once they implement a lot of these changes, they start to get a little bit more of that traction and they feel a lot better about how they're presenting themselves. So, you know, Courtney did such a great job talking about personal branding, and that really is the first step to start to think about, you know, what do I want my resume to look like? What does my cover letter look like? What is the best way in which it represents me? So hopefully you spent some time the next couple of days, because that will help infuse how you're looking at your resume, how you're looking at your cover letter, and it'll lead to interviews and all the way along the way. So we'll cover some of those things. A few little housekeeping things here. For those of you that haven't been in the White Stag, that's where I'm placed right now on the second floor, and my window faces front. And so sometimes you might hear trucks, ambulances, fire trucks. So hopefully it won't be too noisy, but know that might be something that you're hearing. And for those of you that are in Portland and would like to someday have a one-on-one, this is where you would sit. You can see the chair right over there. So this is the space where we have our counseling session. So now you kind of know where I am and how I might be available to you. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the presentation. All right, so here we are, Real Talk, we're back, so welcome back. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so when we're thinking about resumes, there's a lot to think about. And what is the main purpose of a resume? Well, it's really to advertise you. And again, kind of like the branding concept, we don't necessarily like to think about that it's an advertisement, but in a lot of ways, it is. So we need to think about how are we representing ourselves in the very best possible way. How are we communicating that? Are we being clear? Communication is so important to employers, whether it's in the oral form or in the written form. So be thinking about, how am I communicating myself? What is the right thing for me to showcase? There's so many things to focus on. I know sometimes we have these experiences and we want to list every single thing that we've done, But really, let's just focus on the things that we want to continue to do or ways that we can show our progress versus listing every single thing that we've ever done in each experience. So really focus on showcasing the very best. And ultimately, the point of the resume is to get to the interview. So how do we offer a resume that will say, hey, let's take a look at this person? Now, keep in mind, when you are applying for jobs, I typically recommend that if you qualify for about 75% of the expectations, go ahead and give it a shot and send in your resume. So, so be thinking about that when you're trying to get to the interview. Also know that it is a work in progress. No resume is ever done. There can always be work. And I don't say that to overwhelm you. I say that so that you think about that it's just always something that we can be tweaking and working on. I've worked with a number of people who, you know, they've had their parents look at it, they've had HR people look at it, and there's still, some of it is kind of old school and it needs to be updated. So I'm sure that you'll find that when you submit your resume, even if you think it's been vetted by all the best people, there's always something to improve on. So, and that's what we want to help you do. Tailoring your resume is something that, you know, gets mixed reviews. Of course, you want it to communicate your personal brand, and hopefully you're only applying to places that are relevant. I'm not necessarily a fan that says you have to revamp your resume every single time, because that takes so much work. But again, if you have a very tailored, focused job search process, which we'll talk more about on Tuesday, I do believe that we can maybe move some things around here and there, but you shouldn't have to rewrite a resume every single time. The other thing is it's so easy to get confused about which resume did I send to which organization, and that, just organizing that alone can be such a challenge for you. One way to kind of take care of that is to have one very long version of all of your experiences. So as new opportunities come up for you, you can check those out and move things around and bring the most relevant things up front. So never lose anything that you've ever done, but we are going to always strive to have one page. Mostly all of us as recent graduates, one page will be sufficient, especially knowing that people are only spending 20 seconds looking at it. We want to keep them engaged. So I have seen some recent grads with 2 pages, which is okay. But again, you just need to make sure that it's all relevant. I'm not a fan of somebody that has maybe 1 page and then a third up at the top. To me, that says, okay, you weren't efficient enough with your language, so we can help you tighten up that language if that is a case that may be occurring for you. The other thing that can be challenging is, what word should I use? What language should I use? I'm not talking about a foreign language, but what language should we use that makes it engaging, so, or relevant to the job? So I encourage you to, you know, go on the internet and look at some of those jobs that look interesting to you. Look and see how they describe that skill set or that accomplishment. And if that's you, then start adapting some of that language, because every industry has different buzzwords, whether it's tech or creative, or I know there's some GIS folks, so there's a lot of technical language in what you would need to convey in your resume. So really, really pay attention to that. What are some guidelines? So design is important, but not really overly designed. I'm not really a big fan of the Times New Roman kind of boring resume that's black and white. Black and white is okay, but don't feel like you have to, you know, have it be really conservative, unless that is your field. If, you know, if you're a lawyer, maybe that's what they want to see. So just really know your industry. I think it's great to have kind of a masthead up at the top. A lot of you do have a creative side to you. So I encourage you, maybe at the top you have something that indicates maybe a logo that represents your name, or just some color in the headers, something that says something about you. So it's okay to have design, you just can't have it be distracting so that it takes away from the content of what's on the resume. It's also really important to be consistent. So whatever format you come up with in terms of, you know, listing your position, then the organization, the city, the state, and the years, make sure that's consistent in your education and each one of your experiences. Sometimes I see people tend to mix it up. And again, if you're thinking about a recruiter spending 20 to 30 seconds on that, that can be discombobulating and say, wait, where am I supposed to look? Because they start to get a rhythm of what they visually want to see. So make sure that you're consistent in your complete layout of what you're doing. Proofreading is key. I can't tell you how many mangers are out there and not managers. So make sure you're reading it carefully for edits. Have 3 people look at it too. When you become so close to a document like that, you really do kind of lose what you're trying to, you can't see all those little things. And as much as those recruiters are trying to hire people and to fill those gaps, they're also looking for things to get rid of people. So if they see an error, they're going to say, if they weren't that careful to do this, they don't care enough about the job. Make sure what you're including is relevant. It kind of goes back to don't put every single bullet that you have in there. Really focus on what's going to be most important for that job and the kind of work that you want to continue doing and developing. So focus on what's relevant. And then the last 3 bullets on this slide are the most important and the ones that I really want you to take away from is when you're trying to think about what you want to write for each one of your experiences, these are the 3 criteria I want you to consider, because we get kind of stuck in this duties and responsibilities notion instead of what did I accomplish, how did I add value, did I do it in a measurable way? So I launched a fundraising event where 300 people attended and we raised $1,000, if that was an activity that you did in school or something like that. That shows not only accomplishment, but how you added value to the organization, and you did it in a measurable way by numbers and how much money that you raised. So again, get away from planned an event or, kept track of data. Talk about what you accomplished, what the end result was, the value that you brought, and any kind of numbers. Now, I do want to clarify, I don't want you to feel like you have to have all 3 of these in every bullet. Sometimes that doesn't always work. Sometimes there isn't a measurement, but maybe you made something more efficient. So please don't get hung up on having every single one, but please consider at least acknowledging one of those 3 when you're writing one of those bullets. Format. Okay, so people always ask, this is always the main thing when we do these job search groups, what kind of format? So first you want to start with your header. So again, we kind of talked on that. That can show a little bit more of your brand, your personality. Maybe there's a little bit of color, but that really is just your name, your email, and your phone number. You don't need to have an address anymore, and especially for a lot of you that are interested in considering places like Vancouver, Portland, or Seattle, so you're open to a few locations. Sometimes that address can be a hindrance to you. They might say, I don't, it's going to be too hard to interview that person, or whatever it may be. So keep it simple, keep it clean. The other thing that I've gotten feedback from recruiters is you don't need to use your formal name. If your name is Christopher Williams, but you go by Chris Williams, make sure it's Chris Williams. However you want to be referred to. Otherwise, you kind of get into that funky little awkward piece of, what do I call you? Do you go by this? Just, be really clear about what you go by. A lot of times people like to have an objective. Personally, I'm not a fan of the objective, but that can be optional for you. Typically, what I see when people do the objective is they say what they're applying to. Well, you're going to probably cover that in the cover letter. So it is kind of a wasted space. And especially, if you are looking for space, I think that's an unnecessary item to have on your resume. Now, the next 2, education and experience. It depends. Most of you will have education first because that is your greatest accomplishment. But if you have had like 3 internships already in your field, you're going to want to lead with your experience. So again, whatever is your greatest accomplishment, that is what you're going to lead with. And under your education, I simply would have, your degree. So, BS and GIS, and have maybe that in italics. And then University of Oregon in bold, and then plain text would be Eugene, Oregon, and then 2014 or 2015. And why I say plain text for city and state and the years, we want that to kind of fade into the background. A lot of people will flush write it, and I think that's, again, a waste because the eye goes to where that white space is. So just have it all in one clean line, but using italics and bold for your position and your organization to add a little bit of interest so it doesn't all blend together. When you also might have study abroad, that would be under education. You might have any honors and awards, anything that's education related. If you don't have a lot of experience in your field, you might choose to have a special project there. You might have some relevant coursework. Again, it's going to depend, and we can give you that feedback as you see your resume. I'm trying to just kind of do a real high level for you here today. Your experience, some people will just have the word experience. If you have general experience and not as relevant to your field, you can use that phrase as experience. If you've had the opportunity to have a variety of experiences, I like to help people name this. This is where you add some flexibility. So maybe you've worked in a lot of restaurants or retail, so you might have some great customer service experience. So maybe one section relates to those experiences that you might have had in high school and college. And then maybe you've had a couple of internships that relate to your field in the journalism field. So maybe it's a communication experience and you have an opportunity to list that. So they do need to be chronological, but I do encourage you, depending on what your experience has been, maybe you break that up so that you can focus on your relevant experience and then focus on your customer service experience. And again, here, we want to focus on really what did we accomplish, as I talked about earlier, how did we add value and all of that. We'll get into that a little bit later. And then leadership, this may actually dovetail into your experience. Again, this depends. So you may have had a lot of volunteer experience or leadership experience while you were on campus. You may say leadership experience and have those. But again, if it's very relevant to what you want to do, it might be under your experience section. It doesn't matter if you got paid for it or not necessarily. Experience is experience. So don't let that be something that might hold you back. And we can talk about that some more as well. Skills, for those of you like the GIS folks or the creative folks where it's Adobe Suite, this is where you're going to list mostly technical skills and language skills. Again, I don't recommend listing skills that relate to, that say just generically public speaking, customer service, those types of things. I want to see evidence of that in your experience. So keep the skills section focused on technical ones, software programs, and language ones is what I recommend. Again, it helps clean up that look. Interests, I'm a fan of interests. I think interests showcase, you a little bit outside of your education and your experience. However, I don't recommend that they be really generic. So I don't necessarily think you should say traveling, cooking, biking or something. Those are generic. But if you have traveled to some really unique places, maybe to Africa or to the Middle East, maybe include that. If you like cooking Italian food, maybe say you like cooking Italian food, but be more specific. I had flamingo dancers, and I thought, that's awesome. People will love that. Put that in there. It's a great, what's nice about that interest is, when you have that kind of awkward moment where you're walking back to do the interview, those are some of the things that might come up. Those are those icebreakers. So I do encourage you to include those as well. And then references. So we don't include references anymore on resumes, and I still see that from time to time, so I bring it up. And we also don't write references available upon request. So those things are just those are wasted. So I encourage you to get rid of that. You want to have a separate sheet with those ready to go with the same branding that you have for your resume, but you don't need to include that. That's a waste of time. Okay, so that's a quick overview. And what I'd like to do is kind of give you a little bit of an activity. So kind of like what Courtney did on Tuesday, we'll give you some time to do this, a couple of minutes. So I want you to practice writing out one of your experiences. So list the title of the experience, whether it was a server at a restaurant or it was a communication specialist at an internship. Write the title. And then I love those vertical lines. If you like those, you can add those. It's just shift and then the / key. It gives a nice, clean, professional look. List the organization where you did that in bold, and then another one of those vertical lines, and then the city and the state, and then put the years in parentheses. It doesn't, again, this is your marketing document, so you don't have to be really technical and include the months on this part. It just gives a little bit cleaner look. If it was just for 3 months in the summer, you might say summer 2013. If it crossed over a couple of seasons, maybe you say winter to spring 2014, but that gives it a more simplistic so that people don't get distracted by counting on their fingers. So work on what that statement would be, and then think about You might want to average about 3 bullets per one, but sometimes it's more relevant to have 2 bullets. Sometimes it's 5. Know that they're probably just going to read the first 2 bullets. But think about something that you've accomplished, something that you've done. Start with a very strong, powerful action verb. If you don't have that action verb list from our website, we'll send it to you in the packet. But lead with that strong, whether you launched something, you led something, you managed something, you assisted something, use those verbs. Know that you really don't want to go more than 2 lines on any kind of bullet, because again, you're going to lose your reader. And so just do that. So I'm going to give you just 2 minutes and work on one of your experiences. Hopefully, as I mentioned in the LinkedIn group, you know, that you have your resume in front of you, and just mark it up, and we'll give you a minute to do that. Okay, now I know that's not enough time, so you can keep writing while we're doing this, but I'm going to go through kind of my final, my Favero's favorite tips. So these are the takeaways that I think are kind of most important to think about when you're creating a strong resume. I mentioned avoid using those months. That just kind of distracts the reader. You want to average about 3 bullets per your experience. Again, I'm not a rule follower on that. So maybe it's 2, maybe it's 5, but average around 3 just so it shows some depth to what you've done. Lead with the most important thing. I notice sometimes people almost do it chronologically. They list the first thing they did in their experience, then the second thing they did. Lead with the thing that you're most proud of, because that's what they're most likely to read. Know that you're selling yourself in this document. It is an advertisement of your greatest strengths and accomplishments. Certain words to avoid that I see a lot. People, I want you to focus on using those action verbs. So avoid words like worked. It's all work, so we don't need to use that word again. Duties include or responsible for. Those are 3 errors that I see a lot of, and they don't say anything to the reader. Again, I'm trying to help you get to that next level, so you want to have those really strong action verbs. Don't use less than 10-point font. For people like me that's close to 50, we don't always want to have to pull out our readers and try to see what you're writing there. Avoid serifs. Times New Roman is the most boring font in the world, so stay away from that font. Use a nice, clean, if you have a lot of content, I highly recommend Arial Narrow, as you can pack in a lot of content and it still looks very professional. Calibri is a nice, clean one, but try to avoid some of those serifs because it looks a little old school. And then I'm going to give you some of my favorite verbs. So if you've had the opportunity to do this, achieved, initiated, increased, launched, created, developed, analyzed, led, and managed. Those are some of my favorites. Okay, so now we're going to see how the Q&A is working. And see if there's any questions. If not, we'll go on to cover letters, which I know was a really hot topic on LinkedIn. So any questions? I don't see any questions right now. That must mean that I covered everything and you're ready to jump right into cover letters. I'll give you 1 more minute.
Linda,
Yeah,
can you?
I can.
We're going to put up an image to show people where to go to find Q&A. It's a little confusing on their end.
Okay.
So let me put this up quickly. Just 1 second, Sarah. That's okay. Sorry, everyone. We're just trying to get this to work here.
How about
So on your side, you see this right up here in this right hand corner where the little white boxes are. If you click on that, it should give you the drop down, and then you just want to hit Q&A, and it'll ask you to submit your questions there. So feel free, if this, I know we have a little delay going on, so if you still want to ask resume questions after we move on to cover letter, that's okay. Just know that that's where that's at. All right, Linda, I'll throw it back to you here.
Okay, so are we back at me?
Yes.
All right. And let's go to the next slide. Can we see cover letters, purpose, and format?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, so again, yeah, feel free to ask any questions, and when I get done with cover letters before we head into LinkedIn, I'll cover those. So I know that this is a really hot topic. I heard you. So again, what is the purpose of a cover letter? The purpose is to draw the recruiter in. Now, one of the things that I think happens with people is they spend a lot of time on cover letters, but they haven't really done their research. Sending out a bunch of cover letters and newsletter and resumes into the black hole can be very, very depressing. So again, that's why we really want you to have a targeted approach to your job search, which we'll talk a little bit more on Tuesday. But just applying to things online is not the way to go. You've probably heard the statistic that 80% of jobs are not even posted. There's lots of ways to get out there, but the ones that are posted, everybody's applying to. So if you find something that you really want to apply to, or you hear about something, the best thing to do is to see if there's anyone within the organization that you can talk to before you even write that letter. I see you, Sarah. Got it. We're testing the Q&A, so it is working if people do want to send questions. So think about that first. Do your research. I know sometimes it says not to contact the employer, which is why you want to do your own research on LinkedIn, which you'll learn a little bit more about. So, but first off, find out who you can send it to. Try to avoid sending it to a hiring manager. Find the actual name. So that is really important, to find the name if you can. So do that first, address it to a person. That is a really helpful way to get them to look at it. And then let's talk about the format. So there's a really clean format that I recommend called you, me, and we. And I'm going to talk you through those. What I've noticed a lot of people do is they start off by talking about themselves in the very first paragraph, and I don't recommend that. You want to show that this is a targeted company that you're really excited about, that you know something unique about. Maybe you know some people there. Maybe someone has referred you to that person. So let's use an example like Alpha Media. Alpha Media is a local radio station. They own a number of radio stations up here in Portland. And I have some good friends that work there. So a lot of times they'll send me emails and they'll say, Linda, I'm looking for somebody like this. We haven't posted it yet, but if you have anybody, let me know. So you want to say, Alpha Media, okay, I'm going to write to them because I love music and I know about their station. And Linda Favero's recommended that I talk to them. So the first paragraph's all going to be about that organization, how you heard about the organization, what you love about the organization. So really, it has no effect on you. You can find some things on their website, but I encourage you to dig a little deeper. For here in Portland, whatever the local trade publications are, there's a local newspaper. If there's something, anything online, try to find something. If you're an architect, maybe they've just built a building that you drive by every day or you ride your bike by every day and you just love it. So think about that. That's that first paragraph, and that will hook them. Again, it has to be very brief or you won't get their attention. The second paragraph is you want to take a couple of the things that you worked on in your resume and really develop them. So if you look at the job description, what are the 2 experiences that you've had that you think are most relevant to that? You want to just make that case of that instant value that you can provide them. So analyze that resume, your resume, compare it to the job description, and go into depth about that, because you can't really do it with just a bullet. So talk about how that experience will support what they're looking for. You want to show that instant value when you're just reading the cover letter, that, oh my gosh, he or she really gets it. She understands what we're looking for. She has some relevant experience. One thing that I also noticed that happens in that middle paragraph that you don't want to do is you don't want to take anything away. The one word that I like to get out of everyone's vocabulary is the word just. So if you say, oh, I just don't have this, or I just don't have that, or don't, that's not the point of the cover letter. Talk about what you do have, what you do bring to the table. And again, using the alpha media, maybe you worked at the local radio station down in Eugene, or you planned events. A lot of times they look for event people, or they have salespeople. So maybe you did some customer service and you sold. So again, whatever it is that they're looking for, that's what you talk about. But probably only 2 experiences in that cover letter is really what you want. So the things that are most relevant. Again, it's just to get you to the interview. You can't say everything about yourself, just a little bit. And then the last one is the we. Again, you're tying the pieces together. So maybe reference something that you, again, why you like this organization, your most relevant experience, and why you would love to continue the conversation to discuss further about the job and your qualifications. So just kind of lay that out there that you want to talk to them about it. Sometimes people are really comfortable doing this, sometimes people aren't, but sometimes I say, I'll follow up in a couple weeks just to make sure you've received all of my materials. It gives you that window to contact them again by saying that you're going to just make sure that they've received all of their materials. So that is a simple format. People that do that, they do get the calls back. So try to take, if you focus on not focusing on yourself in that first paragraph, but waiting till the middle, I think that is really key. You just have to do a lot of research and be really targeted with what you're doing. So we're going to do an activity, and I'm going to review these questions as you're doing your activity. So the me paragraph is the paragraph that you can probably utilize the most. Your first paragraph is going to be tailored, obviously, to the organization, and same with the last. But the me paragraph, if you're targeted in your application process, hopefully you can use that one over and over again. Now, this takes some time to write. I just want you to kind of take a stab at it, and then for your homework, you can finish on it. But think about an employer or a job that you've been considering, something that you're really attracted to. Maybe you have a job description in front of you right now that you could look at. What could you, develop in that me paragraph that would be most relevant to that opportunity? So, and I'd like you just to spend a little bit of time looking at that while I review these questions, and then we'll do the Q&A. Okay, I'm gonna switch my screen back over. No, actually I'm not. I will. Let me just do my final tips, and then I'll answer your questions. How about that? So my final tips, and then we'll answer your questions. Remember, when you're writing the cover letter, remember what is in it for them. So keep that as your focus. It's not about you, it's about them. You want to stay positive, cordial, respectful, and natural. Again, you want it to be your authentic self. Courtney talked a lot about that. This is part of your brand too. This is a way for them to see your written communication skills. Again, stay positive and respectful. Rely on nouns and verbs, less adjectives and adverbs. So really use active voice. Try to stay away from that passive voice. And then edit. Again, so many mistakes are made in cover letters. I was working with an architect, and she I read this, and this never happens. I'm reading her cover letter and I'm thinking, I said, oh my gosh, my red pen didn't come out. That never happens. And she said, oh, thanks. I've edited it 20 times. Now, I don't mean that to sound daunting, but it was impressive. I mean, it was very compelling. And unfortunately, she did get a job with an architecture firm. So it does make a huge, huge difference to edit that so carefully. And less is more. It's hard to write a succinct letter, but you want to strive to keep it to 2/3 of a page if you can. Again, with short paragraphs, it's just more likely to be read and someone doesn't say, oh, this is too overwhelming. I don't think I can do it. So those are my final tips. Now I'm going to switch back over here so that I can talk to you and answer some of your questions. Okay, great question, Michael. We should follow up even if they stated no calls or contacting them. Okay, so you can't just do that blindly, but if you happen to find somebody in the organization that is maybe not the direct hiring person, so maybe you find a duck, which Sarah and James are gonna talk to you a little bit about how do you use LinkedIn to find people. If you can find somebody else in the organization and say something like, I applied for this position, I'm just curious if you happen to know, it says no calls. Do you know if they might be open to that? Sometimes people are great about it and sometimes people aren't. So it is kind of a gray area, but you don't want to be disrespectful of the process. So that's one trick that I recommend. If you can find somebody else in the organization and just see what they know about the process, sometimes people are willing to help out. I actually got a email this morning from somebody that asked me if I knew somebody for a position because they were going to give a $4,000 benefit package to if someone could help them find this position. So sometimes people get rewarded if they find people to fill those positions. So again, if you're applying cold and it says no contacts, that's very hard to make that contact. But again, if you can network your way around the organization, that helps. Okay. Okay, so then if I coordinated an event that didn't have that good of a turnout with the measurement, would I include that in the resume still? So you can maybe just talk about your process for how you worked in the event without giving the results. So that's why I try to be clear. You don't always have to have a number if it's not the most relevant, but if you managed a huge project and you were with a team of 10 or 5 or whatever, maybe you're going to emphasize something different in that event. If the attendance wasn't high or you didn't raise the money, focus on something else that makes you proud. I mean, hopefully there's something about it where you added value and you felt good about it. Okay, most of the time the places I have applied to state to supply a resume and portfolio, but not a cover letter. Okay, when this occurs, usually I have the initial email serve the purpose of the cover letter. What would you suggest for the situation? I think that's perfect, yeah. I think especially if this is one of the creative people, the digital arts people, I think, but then use that. So sometimes it says no cover letter needed. I always recommend doing it anyway, but so as long as you're doing it in the email, I think that's a perfect solution to that. That's a great question. I applied for a job that required leadership experience. They didn't count my non-paid experience. Does that happen often or just probably within this organization? Yeah, that's interesting that they specifically said non-paid. I haven't seen that before. Maybe they're saying just professional leadership experience, and sometimes when people use that term professional, that implies that it's paid. So I hope that that's just different. But Linda, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know a little bit more about that and make sure that I'm answering that question carefully. Okay, how often do design format recommendations of resumes change? Over the past year, I've received different people, professors tell me different things and how to write a resume, and I didn't really agree with them. Oh, that's an interesting question. You know, I do feel that if you don't agree with the recommendation, then don't do it. So, and that's usually the advice that I give to people. I'm saying, I'm one person. I do see a lot of resumes, and I've done this for several years. So you're getting my input and the feedback that I get back from people that I work with. But if something doesn't seem right, I think it's really important for you to trust your gut because you want it to clearly represent who you are. That's the bottom line. And nothing, I don't know who these professors are, but a lot of times professors, what they have to submit when they apply for jobs is very different than what we have to do in the working world. So sometimes they don't always know the latest. Now, again, I'm not being disparaging, but I don't know the circumstances. So, so again, we can talk about that offline, what you have concerns about. But typically I do recommend you always go with your gut. Even when I'm giving recommendations, I don't say you have to take my advice. Okay, we're going to cut off Q&A and a couple of questions, and we can answer more of these questions on the LinkedIn group. But these are great questions, and we really appreciate you being this active. My resume is 2 pages. I felt that with as much experience I had, that was needed to show that. Should I reduce it more? No. If it's all relevant, it's okay. But do know that they may not go to that second page. So stay really focused on your primary work on the first page. But again, I hope I got across it. It depends, and I have seen recent graduates with 2 pages, and it was all relevant. If your coworker knows someone within an organization, but they're not in the department you're interested in, is it a good idea to reach out to them? Oh yes, absolutely, because they may help you, or they may make a recommendation, or if they're working there, maybe they'd be willing to go and talk to that person. So even if they're not in that department hiring, I would still try to network that way a little bit more. Can I answer this last one, Courtney?
Yes, of course. Sorry, I was on mute.
That's okay. I have been applying. I have plenty of professional experience with internships and being a research associate. I'm having trouble networking. I like the you, me, we approach and the targeted approach. Good. So networking, I guess I'm not clear on this question in terms of, it sounds like, but networking to get somebody's name to apply. I guess I'm not clear on exactly what you're asking, so maybe you can clarify that part. Unless, Courtney, do you have a sense of what he's trying to ask there?
I wasn't sure either. I wonder if it's networking in general, we'll cover that next week. But if it is specifically to get a name, there are several things that you could do to try to find out that person's name. I've even gotten to the point where I've emailed human resources and said, I'm not looking to contact this person. I'm just wondering like who the hiring manager is for this position, if you're looking specifically to address your cover letter to someone. But as far as networking to find out contacts in the organization, perhaps our next session might answer that a little bit more.
Okay, great. Thanks, you guys. That was great. And again, feel free to continue the dialogue on LinkedIn. Now, Courtney's going to take over on LinkedIn.
All right. Hopefully you all see me now. Applause for Linda. I think you actually have an applause button on your end if you all want to give her an actual applause.
Hey.
That was fantastic, and a lot of what Linda talked about is going to carry over into LinkedIn. So we have about 20 minutes-ish scheduled. So I'm going to cover as much as I possibly can. Please send your questions in as soon as you think of them, and I will get to them and answer as many as possible. And then any that I can't answer, I'll just put in the LinkedIn group so that you all have responses to those. So let's go ahead and get started. I just want to say first that I love LinkedIn, like a lot, kind of in a weird way. I think it is fantastic for so many reasons. So like I said, anything that I can't cover today, love to have a conversation with you outside of that. And forewarning, I'm working on my own profile right now, so it's not the best example, but I'm going to get it to the great example so that you all have that as well. But there's a lot of good ones out there. All right, I'm just going to start my screen share here. So this is just some rough numbers to give you all some context. About 94% of employers are recruiting through LinkedIn. And this is just one study, and I can give you all sources at the end. But virtually everyone's using it. Let's just put it that way. It's heavier in some industries more than others. As you can imagine, business type industries are using it a lot more than, for example, maybe elementary school education. But we're finding that more and more recruiters are using this tool. They roughly spend about 6 seconds looking at your profile, and 19% of that is looking at your photo. So we're going to talk about that a lot more later in the presentation, but your photo is very important. Also know that they get a recruiter's view. So we're going to talk about keywords later in the presentation, but know that recruiters are often not searching for you by name unless you have a connection with them already, but they're searching by keyword. So again, I'll talk about that in more detail. All right. Sometimes I try to change my slide on the wrong screen. There we go. Okay. So throughout this conversation, as Linda said, remember your brand or your image. Someone put a fantastic question, I think it was Michael perhaps, in the group, which I'm going to address there about being too cognizant of your brand. So I'll talk about that in the group, but fantastic question, Michael. But continue to think about throughout this presentation and when you're writing your resume and when you're building your profile about who your audience is. Always keep that in mind. The experience that you have, and then what makes you memorable. So I won't, because it's a little bit too hard to talk about any of your specific experiences, without me knowing them yet. I'm going to keep this pretty high level or pretty broad. But as we get into reviewing your profiles, we can definitely talk more about how you're incorporating what makes you memorable and making sure that your brand is a part of that. So a couple nice to know things. I'm going to be going back and forth between actually LinkedIn and this presentation. So forgive me if that transition is a little wonky, but two things that are great to know. You can turn off update alerts. And what I mean by that is while you're editing your profile, if you don't want people to see that you're making changes, you can turn that off. If this is your first kind of full-time job search outside of college, I would recommend not turning that off, because every time you update your profile, it's one more chance for you to hit someone's radar and get someone's attention. So I completely understand if you want to turn it off, the little things, like if you're editing your headline over and over and over again, feel free to turn that off. If you are in a job right now currently and you don't want them to know that you're job searching, turning off this broadcast is a really good idea. But I would recommend, like I said, for now, if this is kind of your first full-time job search, go ahead and leave that on and embrace the obnoxiousness, because that means people are seeing you. You can also see your stats. So I'm going to try to show you that really quickly here on LinkedIn. It's a really cool feature, I think. So you can look right here if you're on your profile, and it'll say, 8 people viewed your profile. You can click on this. You all will get to see how many people look at my profile. You can see profile views in the last 90 days, and they'll show you this little graph here if you want to find out some more information. What's cool about it is also will tell you what you did. So I can't scroll off this, but over in this right-hand corner here, oh, there we go. Over in this right-hand corner here, it'll say, you commented on 5 group topics, you added 3 connections, etc. So you can get a sense of what you're doing that's working for you. But that's kind of just a little nice to have thing. You can also see who is viewed, within certain organizations. What's cool is you can see up top if you post, and I'll tell you more about posts later, you can see that. And then you can also see how your profile ranks against other people. Now, for me personally, I don't care so much about moving up in the ranks, but what's awesome about this is that I can go to these people's profiles and see what they're doing really well. So I can kind of steal what they're doing well for my own profile to make it better. I don't know if I'll ever move up to number 1, or if that's your goal to move up to number 1, but it is cool to see what people are doing well. All right, so I'm going to go back to this here. Sorry if I'm making you all, oh, of course. I have to click through, close your eyes for a second or something. Avert your eyes while I click through. Okay, so, oh gosh, it's going all the way back. Okay, hold that thought. I'm going to try this one more time. Okay, there we go. So hopefully you all see, should I upgrade right now? This is a question I get asked all the time from students and recent grads. Should I upgrade my account? Personally, I recommend you not upgrading at this point. Just stick with the free account. If you feel like you really are going to use LinkedIn as one of your major job searching tools, then it might be worth it for you. But I would say make sure you're comfortable where you're at right now and then upgrade. The benefits of upgrading is you get a premium badge next to your name, if that's something that's important to you. People like to tell us millennials that we're all about the trophies, so maybe this appeals to you a little bit, your LinkedIn trophy. But that is basically just next to your name so that people can identify you as a premium member. You can see more about who's viewed your profile. So oftentimes on the free account, you won't be able to see everyone who's viewed your profile, which can be a little bit obnoxious. But this would, if you upgrade, that will allow you to do that. There's something called Open Link if you upgrade, and that allows you to connect with anyone. Anyone that's joined Open Link says, I'm free to have you connect whether you know me or not. So that's kind of a cool feature. And then more search results. So you'll actually see more things when you search in that top bar, more people, more jobs, etc. So my advice, not worth the money quite yet. If you are an extensive LinkedIn user, then go ahead. I personally haven't upgraded yet. And as I told you, I have an undying love for LinkedIn. So keep that in mind. So we're going to be jumping around just a little bit, so bear with me here, but I want to try to cover as much as possible. So the idea of following people. You can follow companies, news, influencers on your profile. And this is something that Linda said about she likes that people put their interests on their resume. This is a similar idea. So if you follow specific companies, influencers, it can say a lot about you and who you are, maybe even outside of the professional world. So of course you want to follow all appropriate things, and I'm putting those in air quotes. I do that often while I'm talking to you all. But appropriate things, what you deem appropriate. But this is a really cool way for someone to get to know you a little bit more than just your professional experience. Okay, so as far as LinkedIn works, you have this thing called your network, right? One of the biggest benefits of LinkedIn is that you can manage your network. So you can manage people that you've met, people that you want to meet, etc. So you have you, of course. Then you have what's called a first connection. So this is someone that you know directly. So for me, Linda is one of my first, well, I hope Linda is one of my first connections on LinkedIn. So we are directly connected. I reached out to her, or she reached out to me and said, click that connect button on our profile. Then you have your second connection. So for example, this might be, Linda was talking about some recruiters that she knows. So I don't know that recruiter personally. I haven't connected with them, but Linda has. So that would be a second connection. And then every person that recruiter knows is my third connection. So just so you all know, you're welcome to message your first connections at any time. And then there's some differing factors on who you can message outside of that, whether you have a premium account or if they've allowed that. So just keep that in mind. But you can message, which is basically email for LinkedIn or InMail. You can message your first connections at any time. So that's just a little bit about how that's set up. If you see anywhere when you're doing your LinkedIn, if you see, this person's your first connection or your third connection, that's what that means. Should I connect with people? I don't know. Again, a question that I get often from recent grads and students. So there's some pros and cons to this. For me personally, if someone reaches out to me and it seems at least somewhat related to what I am doing or am about, I will connect with them even if I don't know them. My advice would be don't spam. So don't just go kind of off the wall inviting anyone you can possibly think of because you're going to get known as someone that spams other people, and people can report you for doing that as well. You only get 3,000 invitations, and I say only a little bit sarcastically because that's kind of a hefty number, but just keep that in mind that if you decide to go out and connect with the world, you only get 3,000 invitations. So I would say just make whatever feels most comfortable for you, go ahead and do. For me, I don't mind connecting with people that I don't know as long as I could at least see why they might want to connect with me. If you don't want to connect with them, don't feel bad at all about turning that down. Let me just put out a reminder that if you are job searching again for kind of your first full-time role, I would be less concerned about turning people down than I would accepting. All right, so then there are groups. This is, to me, one of the most underutilized features of LinkedIn, and I'm just going to pop over again so I can show you kind of what I'm thinking about here or what I'm doing. Interests, that's what I was telling you about following, like companies, influencers. Then you have this groups tab. So Real Talk is one of those groups, so I won't spend too much time on this. But this is where you can join either professional associations in your field, or groups that you've set up, either like the alumni, the UO alumni group, which James is going to talk to us a lot about later on. Know that exists as well. All right, I'm going to try to do this more gracefully than I did the last time, but let's be real, that might not happen. Oh, pun intended on the real talk there. Okay, so I apologize, avert your eyes again. I promise you I will figure this out. If anyone has any genius suggestions, let me know so I'll scroll through here. All right, so then recommendations. So just so you all know, I'm talking kind of broad about a lot of things right here. And then towards the end of the presentation, I'm really going to narrow down into your experience, your summary, your headline, a few more tangible takeaways. So just bear with me as we give the full scope here. Recommendations is one of my absolute favorite things about LinkedIn. So you can show proof for how good you are at things. Unlike on your resume, people are taking your word for the thing that you did well. With recommendations on LinkedIn, someone else is telling how great you are. So I would, and I'm going to recommend you all do this right now, is to think about 2 to 3 people that you could ask for a recommendation. This list here that I'm showing you, the 1, 2, 3, 4, that's how recruiters from a few studies have viewed the importance of a recommendation. So if it's from an employer, that's going to be one of the highest recommendations. If it's from a customer or an employee, that's going to be one of the second kind of most impressive recommendations. A colleague is third, and then friends, of course, or family is going to be last. So right now, just take a few seconds and write down 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 people that you can think of that would provide a good recommendation for you. All right, and then I'm going to post this, or perhaps email it out to you. We're still trying to figure out if we can post documents in the LinkedIn group. But either way, when you get my social brand workbook, I give you a template on asking for these recommendations. So you can kind of just fill in the blanks if you want to. Made it really simple for you. But be sure, however you ask them, be sure to include the qualities you want them to highlight. So don't just say, would you mind giving me a recommendation? But say, I'm applying for marketing jobs. I would love if you could talk about my creativity and my strategic planning. I know that feels awkward, but trust me, your recommender will appreciate it far more than you can imagine. So there's the recommendations. And just for sake of time, I'm not going to switch back to the profile view, but know that on your profile, there's a downward arrow right next to view profile button when you're on the editing side of your profile. If you click that, there's a link that says ask to be recommended, and that's where you can go ahead and send out those requests. All right, so keywords. This is the way that employers find you. So Linda talked about this. We talked about this with your brand, thinking about who your audience is and what keywords are going to be really meaningful or important to them. Cool tip if you're struggling with figuring out those keywords. If you all have heard of word clouds, I know they're a little outdated now, but they actually can be great for this purpose. So if you have made a word cloud before, if not, you can go to WordItOut, WORDITOUT.com, and make one for free. And what you can do is copy and paste the job description that you really want, put it in that word cloud, and what it will do is it will make the words that are most important or used the most large. So I just did this yesterday. I was looking at a job, and leadership came out as one of the, I should clarify, I wasn't looking at a job to leave this, but looking at a job in preparation for this presentation. And leadership was one of the biggest words that popped out. And so to me, if I don't have the word leadership on my profile or on my resume, it's likely that the people that I want to see my profiles will never see it. So you can also, cool tip, you can do this word cloud for your resume or for your LinkedIn profile, whatever content you include. And that will give you a really good idea of what words are popping out most to people. It can be a kind of a cool visual way to see what you're communicating. Just a heads up, I want you all to know, I know that we technically end at 1. I'm going to keep going and record this so that if you need to come back, and watch it later, you're more than welcome to. I have about 3 slides left, so it's not too much if you want to stick around and listen. But know that I will post this recording so that you can come back and watch the rest of this if you need to. And then feel free, again, keep those questions coming, and I will answer them either here or in the LinkedIn group. Okay, so keywords. Choose about 5 to 10 keywords once you've thought through your audience and done either some of that word cloud work, and work them in naturally. So when we're reviewing your profiles and your resumes, we'll help you with this, but don't put like sales 10 times because you think sales is one of the keywords. Use them genuinely and naturally. The most high impact areas, in other words, the places that pick up on keywords the most, are your headline, your summary, your skills section, your job titles, and your job descriptions. So those are the 5 places, 5 places that you want to be sure you have keywords in them. All right, and like I said earlier, if I haven't already said this enough, this is how recruiters most of the time will find you. Okay, so now getting into your experience, the meat of things. After I'm done with my slides, I'm going to walk over to my profile so that you can actually see what I'm talking about here. But I recommend, and this is what I'm working on changing in my own personal profile right now, is to attach your resume to your summary. So when you write in your summary, it will give you an option to attach a document. I personally would attach your full resume there, so a PDF version of your complete resume. And then in your descriptions, rather than copy and pasting what you did from your resume, actually give life to your descriptions. And what I mean by that is write in first person. Use I statements, talk to your reader, explain the 3 things I would make sure you do is explain your role, your responsibilities, and your greatest accomplishments. Again, I'm going to send you all some examples for these, but you certainly can if you're just getting your profile started. This is the first thing that I did as well, is I just copied and pasted my resume over. That's a perfectly okay thing to do. But if you want to bring it to the next level, actually write to your reader in that. Your LinkedIn profile is not to serve as your resume. So the cool thing is if you attach it to your summary, then you have it there if they want to look at it, and then you can give a little more life to your descriptions. If you're talking about a past position, you can discuss how it set you up for work now. So talk about those transferable skills. Like I gained my communication skills in this position, coordinating sorority recruitment. I know one of you did that. I gained communication skills here, and I think this is going to set me up well to communicate efficiently when I plan events in the future. Something like that. Again, include the keywords. If you don't have a current position right now, so if you are currently unemployed, you can do something that would be adding a position. So you're kind of going to make a fake position and say, I'm searching for, X, Y, and Z, and give some more details about what you're looking for. Some recruiters have mixed feelings about this, but if you do not have a current position listed on your profile, your profile won't be considered complete, and therefore you won't show up as much in recruiters' searches. So again, do what's right for you on this. Either add, the I'm searching position, or you can just not have a current position, and that's okay too. Just keep that in mind that will affect your search. For old positions or for less meaningful ones, feel free to just include the key skills you gained. And I'm going to show that to you on my profile, what I've done for some past positions. But that can allow you to steer away from trying to include everything you've ever done. I've included a link here, and I'll send it out to you all in the group. But this is a really good place. This person's profile, this is where I get a lot of my information from. She has added some bullet points on her profile that you can copy and paste into your profile. So if you're wondering, how do people get bullet points? Go to her profile, and then you can copy and paste the bullet into your experience sections. Really helpful. She has a bunch of choices for you. All right. So your summary, this is, think of this as your first impression. So like I said, I'll walk you through my profile in a second, but this is the first thing that people see right up top under your photo. So you want to ensure that this grabs the reader's attention. Oh, I have 2 number 1s there. That should be 1, 2, 3, 4, grabs the reader's attention. You want to explain why you're great or the benefits of you, highlight an achievement, and tell them what to do afterwards. So you can go a little more flashy with this, or you can go a little bit more standard, whatever feels most comfortable for you and your brand. Flashy version would be something like, I love customer service. Turning unhappy clients into loyal customer advocates is my specialty, right? That's pretty bold. That's grabbing someone's attention. Or you can go more standard, introduce yourself similar to how you all did in the LinkedIn group. Whatever fits your brand and your audience best is what I would recommend. I give you a few sentence starters there for explaining why you're great. So, one of my strengths is, or I get excited about. Again, I'm going to give you some examples, but this is just a good way for starting that summary place. Then you have your headline. So if you all, right now, you probably have your headline as either your current job title or maybe UO student. I have it as my current job title right now. This is a way to make this, again, a little bit flashier, a little bit more standout. This is a structure that you can work through. So you start with an adjective like aspiring, then your current or dream title, perhaps that's account manager, an application or a skill set that you have, marketing background, suffix, strategizer, something like that, extracurricular activity, foodie, if you learn anything about me, I'm obsessed with food. And then an add-on, so change agent. So I'm gonna, again, I sound like a broken record, I'm gonna give you all these examples, but this can be a really cool way to make your headline much more engaging and impressive. I recommend, rather than having, recent graduate or UO student majored in whatever, I like the idea of having aspiring and then whatever title you are hoping to get. I think it's just much more inviting for a recruiter to look like, and it shows that you're driven as well. All right, so last but certainly not least, your photo. You want to make sure that it is appropriately professional. And what I mean by that is appropriate professional is going to be very different if you're working at a corporate finance office or if you're working into a creative advertising agency. So I would say find what's appropriate in your field that you're going into and then step it up one notch. So make it the professional version of that. If if the ad agency is where you're going, they might likely wear jeans and t-shirts. So I would step that up a notch and wear, a nice button-up shirt or a sweater or something like that. Make sure there's no obstructions or distractions if you can. So sometimes people choose to wear sunglasses in their photos and not for any need, but just, they think it gives them a cool factor. There have been many studies that have showed if you don't need to obstruct your eyes and you do, that can be a really big turnoff for people when looking at your profile. So try to avoid any, distracting shirts or backgrounds or sunglasses that are covering your eyes, anything like that. Smile, and I feel like your mom or, like your grandparent or something. Make sure you smile in your photo. And I recommend that not being the European smile. So there's been studies that have shown if you have, the closed mouth smile, that actually shows that you're showing contempt rather than, this warm welcoming. So try to smile with your teeth if possible, if that's comfortable for you. And then minimal editing and filters. So the last thing that people want to see is, some extreme filter going on. Save that for your Instagram account or Snapchat or whatever. I'm making myself sound really uncool because I actually have never used Snapchat. But keep those filters to Instagram. I do use that. So these are just some examples of photos that have gotten kind of good reviews. Your profile is 7 times more likely to be viewed if you have a photo, so absolutely do that. And make sure it focuses on your head and shoulders. You don't need to do a full body shot by any means. Okay, so I'm going to take us out of this. It looks like we still have some of you watching, so I'll just go through this pretty quickly, but so you can see my profile, and I'll reference some of the things that I've been talking about here. So right here is how you change your photo if you're in edit profile mode, which you can just go right here, edit profile. So here's how you edit your photo. One thing I would highly recommend you doing is making sure that you claim your personal URL. So by that, you just hit this little settings. Oh, nope, I didn't mean to do that. Go back. Okay, it's actually, it's still loading here. Okay, sorry, all. You do want to hit that settings, and then it's right over here on the right-hand corner. And you can actually put your name here. Courtney Ball was taken, so I just did the reverse. But this makes it a lot easier for you to put this link on your resume or send it out to people. Right now, if you haven't claimed your personal URL, it's probably a bunch of numbers of some sort. So just claim that with your full name or whatever name you feel most comfortable with. It's a good insider tip. I'm going to go back here to editing my profile. All right, so here, right here where I have Career Advisor, this is where I was showing you all about editing your headline. So this is considered your headline. So you can just go ahead and type in here. Again, you can copy and paste those bullet points, but if you want to use that format that I showed you, that's a really good place to make this a little bit more engaging. And then, of course, your place of where you're living or working, and then what field you're in. Definitely be sure to include that field there, because oftentimes recruiters will search by that as well. Okay, so LinkedIn has done a cool thing now where they've added just every possible thing that you can add in these little boxes. So here's the summary that I was talking about. You can just write in your summary, add the bullet points if you'd like, and then I'll just show you here. After you save that as your first thing on your profile, you can add the document, and that's where I suggest adding the resume. So a PDF version of your resume right there. I'm going to go ahead and delete that before anyone happens to see it. Okay, so your summary, again, I gave you, I'll give you some templates for that, gave you some ideas already, but that is considered your kind of your first impression. Then you can add any of these other things. I recommend making your profile as complete as you possibly can. Languages, volunteer experience, volunteer opportunities. I always made a joke that I've never met anyone with a patent, and I actually did the other day, so I can't make that joke anymore. So if you have patents, please feel free to do that. Interests, again, posts. So I want to talk to you all just briefly about this, but posts is a really cool thing that LinkedIn just recently added. And think of this as kind of a personal blog, but in the professional sense. So rather than, you know, a Squarespace or a Wix blog that you may have, WordPress, etc., you can post professional things here, and this will show up for your readers. This is really cool because if you are in a field perhaps that you want to get published or that getting published is important to you, or if you just like to talk about your professional work, you can put this out right here. Heck of a lot easier than getting published. I would say don't put anything confidential that you don't want out there yet. But this is a cool feature that they added so that you can do posts. It's kind of like articles for people to read. Okay, so then we have our experience. So you're going to edit your title, the location. If your location is in the system, it will also give you a logo, which is pretty cool right there. The dates that you've been there, and then what you can do when you hit add position, it will give you all of the boxes. LinkedIn has made it pretty intuitive to add information so that you can do that here. And then you can also, again, add documents. I recommend as visual as you can make this, the better. So if you have flyers from events that you've planned or presentations you've created, again, make sure nothing is confidential, but add those to the positions. It makes it really cool for the reader to get a better sense of what you've done. I want to tell you just quickly about how this is how recommendations will show up, by the way. This is what I was talking about that I did for old positions or positions that weren't as relevant anymore. I just put in some of those keywords, key skills that I gained so that people could, those would still show up in the search system, but I wouldn't have to write out a full description about what I was doing there. So that's another option for you as well. You can always add projects. One thing I'll say about your experience section really quickly is know that doesn't have to be paid experience. So if you did really significant volunteer experience that you weren't getting paid for, it's okay to make that an experience, just like a professional experience, rather than making that a volunteer experience that you did on your profile. Most recruiters have said that that's viewed to them just as equally. Unfortunately, Linda stumbled upon someone that was not, but most people said that that's viewed equally. You'll have your education. Just so you all know, you are welcome to move these as much as you want. So you can move them up, you can move them down if you want your education to be first. If you want your experience to be first, you can move those around right here. Just a couple other things. So skills and endorsements, you can go here and add a skill. And let's say you're like, oh gosh, what am I trying to say? Something about leadership, but I don't really know what it is. You can put that in, and then LinkedIn will give you lots of examples as to what that leadership is. Maybe it's strategic, maybe you're developing leaders. And this will give you a good sense of other skills that exist or related skills as well. So you might actually want to do multiples of these. Your connections can endorse you for your skills. So that basically means they're kind of like confirming, yes, you have this skill, and that's how this will show up here. Know that you can decline them to kind of endorse you if you want. That's perfectly okay. But this is another place for you to get some more of those keywords and a little bit more validation about you being good at what you're saying you're good at. All right, so that is the profile view. Hopefully I've showed you everything and made that very clear. LinkedIn can be confusing, so I understand. I'm gonna just jump to these questions here quickly, and I will answer them here, and then perhaps we can also put them on the group. All right, so let me just get out of this. Face, red, as usual. Okay, so let me go to our questions here. Sorry, they're just not showing up quite yet. Okay. If you have a PDF and website version of your resume and portfolio, would recruiters prefer dealing with an email attachment or following links to the relevant documents within an email? Great question, Dan. Unfortunately, like many of our responses, I think it just varies on the person. Personally, I would do both. I would attach it and also include my link. If it's a website that you said, I would just include that link because I think that's very intuitive for people. But if, for example, you have your resume and then also a link to your resume at some point, I would just include both the link and attach it to your email. And if I'm, for any reason, not answering your questions as completely as you hoped or not correctly, let me know and I can re-answer them or have one of my awesome colleagues re-answer them for you. Okay, that was Clint's earlier follow-up, so I'll let that one, we can answer that one on the group. Oh, someone's giving me tips. Thanks, Dan. How to work my PowerPoint. I appreciate it. Oh, yes, this is great. So Dan mentioned that a lot of times you can, for the most part, everyone on LinkedIn can get a premium account trial for a month. I've done that before. So great way to test out if you want a premium account. Just make sure you cancel it before they charge you. But that's an excellent way for you to see if upgrading would be a benefit to you. I ended up doing that and deciding it wasn't worth it to me. So thank you, Dan. That's awesome. Michael asked, where exactly is the headlines section? I'll show you one more time if I didn't. I think you might have gotten it already, but just so you can see, the headlines section is right here. So this, usually people put their job title, but this is where you can make it more dynamic, is right there. All right. On the experience description, would you use the same bullet points that are on your resume, or would you suggest a job description including duties? Okay, so Linda, hopefully I answered this for you already, but if you can, I would recommend not just copying and pasting your resume. If you want to start there, that's perfectly okay. But eventually I would write it in first person. So, you know, on your resume, you might say something like managed event coordination. On your LinkedIn, under your job description, you might say, I was responsible for managing an event of 500 people. And, you know, here's how I went about it with an enthusiastic attitude, etc. So you can give a little bit more life and a little bit more personality on your LinkedIn profile. For the photo, if it is full length, are you able to crop it like you can on Facebook to show? Yes, you are able to crop it. I can do that, show you really quickly. Let me jump over here to screen share. I'm gonna get good at this eventually. So you can see right here that you're able to crop it. I mean, it's within a certain parameter, but you are able to crop it. If I, wanted to make it just my eye, for example, I could do that. So yeah, well, definitely able to crop it like you do on Facebook. All right. Is it okay to use some of the content I wrote on my website on LinkedIn? For example, use my About Me page in the summary section. Yeah, I would imagine. I would want to take a look at your website, but I would imagine that would probably be a great way to go about it. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. LinkedIn requires a job title and company. For us unemployed job seekers, what would you recommend we put in there? Oh, good question, Linda. I actually wrote that out somewhere here. I'll find that one for you. I'm just going to make myself a note. So exact wording for job description unemployed. And I will post that in the group because I did write down exactly what I thought would be a good input there. So I'll get back to you on that one, Linda, if that's all right. Would prescription sunglasses that darken in sunlight count as sunglasses to agencies? It's up in the air on that one. I would say if you can be in a well-lit area when you're taking your photo, that would actually be better so that your glasses don't go dark at that point. So I would just say be concerned or be conscious of your lighting. Most of the time you can tell, but again, it's going to be completely up to that recruiter or that company if they say, oh, I can't see their eyes, so I'm not going to trust them or whatever it may be. So I would say try to avoid that by going in a well-lit area when you take your photo. Hopefully that's helpful. So I think I've answered all the questions on the Q&A. Feel free to send in any more. Otherwise, post those. I'll start a discussion in the LinkedIn group and happy to continue this conversation. Like I said, LinkedIn is a beast, and so we could spend several hours talking about that. Linda, did you have anything to add at all?
No, I think you covered everything really well.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you all for staying on. I know we went way over time. These are two massive topics, so we appreciate it. Any questions you think of or want to continue discussing, post those in the group, and we are excited to hear from you.
And the goal is to work on your resume over the weekend. We'll send you information about where to submit it, but hopefully we can get you to submit it by Monday so that we can divide that up.
Perfect. Thanks you all for tuning in again. So glad we got the Q&A working. It was great to see your interactions throughout, and we love that you joined us.
Yes, absolutely. Have a great weekend, everybody.